lovely to reconnect. I'm very excited to have this discussion with you. I know a number of years ago, just after the last part of COVID, we connected and we were speaking about all things culture, values, in very challenging times. And now it's been a number of years, we're way past COVID, and I'm just excited to reconnect and see how things are going on your end, how you're now looking at the future of food retail and people.
Yeah.
How does this all equation fall out? So just from there, let's catch up. How has the last 24 months been for you?
Yeah, I think a bit like PTSD. You don't really think back to 24 months because you kind of want to block that out. But it was certainly from a retail shopping center driven kind of business model. It was a pretty tough kind of, call it 18 months, and the team had to pivot so many times. They would open and close and open and close, and what that did in terms of our staff levels and who was on work support systems and who was off work support systems and how do you support franchisees and business managers. So that kind of throwing back to the kind of the middle of COVID was really challenging. I think the thought kind of touching base back to values and how important it is to have structured frameworks of principles that are kind of based on values that then allow you to navigate that complexity. Really, it doesn't make it easier, but it just gives you the confidence to know you're making decisions in line with your values and in accordance with these principles. So that, the execution was really kind of time consuming and tough, right? But the decision making wasn't that hard, right? It wasn't that hard to figure out what the right thing to do was. It was just a bastard of a thing to kind of keep up with the complexity and try to mobilize people and try to pivot the business in that environment. So, I guess since then, we at the time we committed to building our teams, building our capabilities, trying to keep as much of our work team together. And then, the post-COVID reopening was just absolute mayhem, right? It was, and there was no students from overseas. So the workforce was at a, vacancy, jobs, you couldn't fill a job. So it was really tough. And I think the teams we did have had to kind of find ways to make things happen, which was really interesting. I think now business is kind of back to something more close to normal, which is a little bit less exciting, but also a little bit less stressful, which is good.
Can we go back to your values statement? Did they stay true? Did you feel that you needed to evolve the values, or with the values that you had? I remember they were authenticity, cheeky. They remained exactly what you needed when you were making these big decisions and taking your people on the journey of change?
Yeah, so we, kind of running through the values, cheeky, connected is a big one. And how do we stay connected in that environment was really important. Authentic, trying to be your best self, but also trying to challenge yourself to be your better self. So this kind of learning growth mindset within this authenticity. So don't, when something's not going your way, don't try to hide it, share it and try to find ways to improve. We've got this concept of own it. So this kind of decentralized thing, when there's an opportunity for you to step up, leadership is about stepping into that situation. Management's about trying to figure out whose job it is to do it. So own it was a really powerful value. And how do we give those tools to, say, franchise partners? And there's a fifth value, maybe it's cheeky. How do you have fun when the wheels are coming off? But to answer your question, the values didn't change at all. And I guess all of those 5 values are encompassed with the single idea, La Familia, and how do we kind of create this community of people that are supporting each other. So that was kind of the overarching theme. How do we maintain our community and look after each other? That was kind of first principle. And then leveraging those values through the process. And it was tough, right? There were times when international students weren't getting financial support. So how do we do whatever we can do within the constraints of reality to make sure we were looking after people that were kind of left outside of the system?
And so community, connectedness, La Familia, this is all, you're really trying to drive the roots of business family, essentially.
Yeah.
How does that happen? And was there I know that within food retail, there was a massive disruption years ago when I think it was McDonald's was the first sort of food retail chain to release the automated checkout where you would order your food yourself, kind of the self-serve. Now, how has did that disruption impact your business? Because I know your business is very much about the customer gets involved in the preparation of the food, or it's more interactive, etc. Right? So one, how did that impact your business, the automation piece? And then two, how do you continue to remain true to the values of community connectedness and family when you can see these digital disruptions coming into the industry?
Yeah, so in our model, which is for those who aren't familiar, Mad Max is kind of like a subway model. You kind of start at the beginning, and there's an interaction, and it's kind of custom made to how you like your food, and then that food is prepared, and you pay, and then you go and eat. So it's quite quick, but it's also quite customizable, personalized. We haven't played as much with the self-service kiosks. We've had a bit of a play with it, but it doesn't work that well in our model. What we did see though is that delivery and all the online aggregator, Uber Eats and Deliveroo and DoorDash, Menulog, that became at certain points 50% of our business. I wouldn't say it was kind of aligned with this idea of connecting with customers. We were disconnected with customers. So I guess where we've kind of pivoted to, if you will, is we're working very hard to make our app an integrated solution to have, so we can curate a bit more of an experience in a digital world, and then have the execution, the delivery provided by a DoorDash or an Uber Eats. So that's a minor thing, but I worry. We have a connection with customers, and those are by their choice, right? If they choose to sit on their sofa and watch TV and order a food and have it delivered, it's not really our job to try to figure out how to over connect with them. They're happy in their environment. I think of the connection a lot more in terms of the internal teams, and how do we set up the teams for a sense of, when you join Mad Max, you're joining the family. You're friends with the people you work with. When you show up to work, it's not a shift. It's kind of a chance to catch up and work and make some money. So how do you blend that kind of from I've got to do 4 shifts this week, but my real life is outside of work, to going to work is a way to enrich in my life. And I guess the story, my son applied for Mad Max and recently joined one of the city stores, and he asked me if I could get him a job, and I said I couldn't. And I told him where the website was and made him apply, and I didn't tell anyone he was applying. He got the job on his own, which I think also great for his confidence. And it's about that ownership. Does he step into the own it value? Okay, he did that, right? But since he's joined, he's made some friends, and he's gone out to dinner with people who are, he's 15. So most of the people are a bit older, so maybe 17, 18, 20. And he's had some dinners with people who are kind of much older than him. He comes back so chuffed about what an experience is, and the fact the team goes out and does something together. So how do we encourage that kind of thing in restaurants? So I think that connection piece is really about.
As a young employee, is he also giving you some advice on how you can improve the culture?
He hasn't as much. I wish the more feedback, the better. And I think,
of course,
there were some questions around the application process and the technology, and how do you get a TFN, and that stuff is not intuitive to a 14 or 15-year-old. But yeah, so I think and during COVID, there was a surge in the WhatsApp group. So every store, every restaurant had a WhatsApp group. Then the franchisees had WhatsApp groups, so the business managers had and the support office had a group. And I think having that kind of lots of contact, although you're still at home or whatever the lockdown situation was, that was really important for people to feel like they were part of something, not just isolated on their own.
Yeah, I'm going to go back on, you mentioned customer journey and meeting the customer where they are, right? And so we are going into this digital, more and more digital world and applications. Part of that is enhancing the digital experience. How have you gone about, I know that you rolled out some TVs or some entertainment within the retail stores in the bricks and mortar model. Has that been accepted well by the customer?
It's hard to know, right? I guess, part of what you're referring to is we brought kind of a large television that plays kind of action sports, kind of surfing and mountain biking and dirt biking and stuff that, I guess the intent for us was, how do we share this idea that Mad Max food is really good for you, it's healthy, it's great fuel for you to go out and live a big life. And how do you tell that story in a way that's kind of intuitive? Oh, I see, there's sports and there's people doing stuff, and that's obviously something that works well with the kind of food we sell. But I don't know that we have any great data or feedback. And I think digital is really tricky, right? Because you get these 3 second windows, or you get a 5 second window, and how much communication and how much attention span can you demand of your customer when you're kind of standing between them and their food. You don't want to block that too much. I think it's about, for us, it's about kind of identifying a personalities, and if it works well for us, people will understand our personality, and they'll kind of have a sense of who we would be if we were a real person. And if they kind of say, "Oh yeah, Max, that guy's kind of a sporty guy and he's pretty healthy," or a sporty girl and pretty healthy, Pilates, you kind of, I think that is kind of what we're hoping to achieve. And it's not easy. And I think we're in the process of doing a digital upgrade cycle, which would be a new website, a new app, and refreshing all that, because I think right now it's a little bit too static and it could be a bit more dynamic.
Yeah, much more engaging.
Mm.
From hearing the sort of upgrades that you bring into the business, I feel like a lot of it is your personal values and what you like in life, like the living a big life and the sports, the health. So when you're bringing people into the business, your employees, clearly they're aligned to some of these values. Are you recruiting well because it's part of the interview? Like, are these questions sort of integrated as part of the hiring process, or how are you being able to identify people that are going to fit right into your family, your business family, your tribe?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I wouldn't say, we're not, if my hobbies include things like riding dirt bikes or ski racing or underwater spearfishing or whatever my kind of adventure sports are, I wouldn't say that that's the DNA of our average employee, right? So I think you go back a step further, you say, well, what are kind of universal desires? I think this idea for a big life, how do we get the most out of our time? How do I feel like I'm doing something meaningful that's value creating for me and for the world around me? And how do we kind of frame that up so that the people that are looking for that kind of experience naturally self-select in? So that's part of the kind of the first filter. And then we probably believe in psychometrics and the fact that we are all kind of predetermined to be some type of person, with some variance and some opportunities to grow and change over time. But so we do a lot of psych profile testing, even at kind of the entry level employee stages. So am I the kind of person that loves talking to people or hates talking to people? Both are fine, right? There's no right or wrong. But how do we make sure that that right person is in the right role so that they can then flourish and then find their kind of happy place? And if we get that right, I guess the likelihood that someone will want to stay goes up, and the likelihood that they'll be happy and that they'll serve a customer in a way that is natural to them is going to happen. So I think those, they're hard things to do at scale, but they're not impossible. And there's great technology to kind of help people make decisions that are right for them, even if they don't know themselves that this is the right or wrong place for them.
I've heard you speak in the past, Clovis, and I I understand that part of the future of food retail is personalization, next level using digital. So right now, I believe one of the things that you mentioned looks to occur in the next 5 to 10 years maybe is, we go into an outlet, and right now we're pressing some buttons and then we order food, but it could potentially even be like an avatar or a digital human that is speaking to us, and there is that voice component. It's hyper interactive, and then the food is sort of personalized to potentially, if they've even got our information from our last order, it will just make it more easier that we might be able to order that, or they'll ask us questions to see if we want to try something new. When you think about these transformations that are ahead of us, how are you thinking about skills? So I'm going back to your comments here about the psychometric testing and how you're bringing in people into the workforce. How have you thought about the evolution of their skills? How are you going to support the transitions that your people, your employees need to make, when we know that as part of the efficiency gains in organizations, there will be this tech adoption?
Yeah, well, I guess first thought is I think the technology is remarkable, and there's two kind of thoughts come out. Like, what are just kind of examples that help me anchor my thinking around what's possible. One is a pizza place in Dubai maybe 5 years ago, maybe even longer ago, they created a fridge magnet. And it was Wi-Fi enabled fridge magnet. So you knew what your favorite two pizzas and drinks and garlic bread and salad combo was. And that this fridge magnet would sit in your apartment, and you could walk into your apartment and just press a button, and the fridge would then connect to the internet and order your food, and it would show up in your house. So the process between wanting what you want and getting it delivered was as simple as walking to the fridge and pressing a button. That's kind of that's not customized, but you customized it once, and then all you had to do is. So I think that, how do you make it really easy for customers to get what they want? That's an interesting kind of insight. The other insight was, one of my mates was in the US recently, and they went to check the drive-through process at some of these big chains, and some of them are using AI-enabled voice systems, right? So they're really accurate. Yes, they do. They remove a person from that business, from that place in the business. But when you go to pick up your food, there's still a person handing it to you. So what it allows that business to do is focus the resource on delivering that one human interaction even better, which I think is really interesting. So you can kind of save a bit of cost. You can save a bit of kind of back end cost. If you can then channel those resources into the interaction that matters, then you can do that really well. But in terms of like, how do you support people in learning, and what is the journey we're all going to have to go on to make sure that we're relevant in a kind of more complicated universe? I just think it's about being a learning growth mindset person. And what does that mean? I think, right? So for us, we have a coach in our business who speaks with our support office team on a structured basis with learning and development programs to kind of help them become better, bigger leaders. We have that same kind of process then translates to franchisees and business managers who run restaurants. And then we have a self-service module kind of system where we can take any one of the 1,000 people that work at Bad Max and can go through this kind of leadership development program. For me personally, I think it's about, picking up a book and reading something. I think the more open you are to just taking in information, the better off you are. So I might read a book a week, and I use Audible because I'm kind of lazy and I don't have time to sit. But when I'm driving, I want to do something. I want to make sure I'm getting new ideas and challenging myself.
That was going to be my last question, because I know you read a book a week. So what is your recommendation right now?
The book that I kind of will give to anyone is Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, the Navy SEAL. It's just a powerful book around kind of like, how do you remain humble? How do you get really serious about taking that extreme ownership, which is where our kind of own it value comes from. So I think that's that kind of growth mindset. It's about always challenging yourself to make sure you're rethinking about where you are and how you're interacting. And ultimately, we are going to be responsible for how we interact with whatever the future of the world is. So there is no 9-step plan that's going to be guaranteed to make you successful from here to 2040. You have to be willing to evaluate the environment. You have to be willing to challenge yourself. You have to be willing to go out and learn something new, and constantly be kind of making bets on who you are and how you want to engage with the world around you. And I think the only bad thing you can do is kind of anchor yourself and say, well, I'm not going to play. I'm staying where I am, and the world will come back to where I am. Like that's the risky play.
With the sort of evolving nature of work, one of the things, you talk about own it, and then the book Extreme Ownership. How do you balance, and how comfortable do your people feel about raising mental health, anxiety struggles, even burnout, when you have one of your values as own it? Like, does that become an issue ever? Do you think that people then feel like, they've got to suppress if they're not feeling like they can own it, or they don't have the courage to speak?
Yeah, I think in isolation, you can say own it is me. When push comes to shove, I will step in and keep taking on more and more and more, and then eventually everyone breaks under the pressure. So that's not a sustainable strategy, and I guess that's not where that's hopefully not how it's interpreted. Although I totally understand the question. And that's why the other value is healthy and supporting each other to make incremental healthy steps, which kind of opens up a conversation around connection and
And having fun, the
and
cheekiness.
having fun. And so
Yeah.
it is kind of hopefully it's a a mixed dish, not not to be eaten individually, each value.
Yes.
We use an NPS ENPS system called Peakon, which is great, which allows once a month for people to kind of answer a range of questions. And one of those is, how stressful is it? How do you feel you're being supported by your manager? As a manager, that then gives us some insights around how do we go and say coach a franchise partner or a business manager to work with their staff. Because if there's red flags going up around something that's not working as well in the restaurant, we can then go and give support to their direct manager and try to figure out if there's something we can do. So mental health is such a challenging place for the leadership of a business, because your right to privacy isn't my place to come and sit down and have a chat with you, because it's a really delicate area. And I think the risk is that for most, or for many leaders, it's just safer to not play in that space, because the risk of somehow stepping on a landmine that you didn't see coming is there. So I think having these mechanisms like this EMPS system, which gives us an ear to listen to a cry for help, that is kind of technology giving us the information, which we then can act on, as opposed to us kind of going out and having conversations without some kind of information, is kind of scary.
And then also, in addition, having those employee assistance programs that are confidential, that are.
Yeah, 100%. So for example, if someone who works in our restaurants who has an issue with their manager, the manager doesn't see that conversation, doesn't know that that's happening. We see it up a couple layers above. So that privacy piece is really important. I guess the other thing around mental health, like for the last two conferences we've held for all of our network, which is 130 people show up for 3 days. We've done meditation, we've done facilitated breath work, and those kind of themes. We keep bringing back these tools, which we think can help people manage stress. We're not forcing it on anyone. We're not making it part of our daily rhythm. So you have to do these things. But by continually exposing people to these kind of tools, which we think, broadly speaking, have positive benefits for those who choose to opt into them, we're kind of creating a playing field where people can find alternate ways to manage stress. Because I think we're all kind of conscious that the world is just a little bit more crazy, a little bit more frenetic, a little bit too busy, a little bit overwhelmed with information. And that's just an accelerating kind of project. So how do we, as leaders and friends and coaches, how do we kind of create opportunities for people to begin to find these tools? And breath work, for example, 95% of the people that attended this conference had never even heard of the concept. So just by bringing that to 130 people in 2 1-hour sessions over 2 days, gave a whole bunch of people a skill and a tool set and an awareness of something that they wouldn't have had otherwise. So I think that's kind of a nice leveling up of awareness on something that's kind of and then hopefully that trickles down to the next tier of kind of the next 1,000 people.
I love that. And I'm sure you wouldn't be doing this. So I'm making an assumption that you've practiced it. It would have had some material impact in your health or well-being for you to then promote it within the organization. Did you do breath work before you exposed your employees to it? And what's that been like? I know that you've done meditation. You've done meditation when you were young and then came back to it.
Yeah.
And how did the whole thing about breath work start for you?
Yeah, so the meditation, I'll just touch on that. It was introduced to me as a young person. I did it pretty seriously for maybe 5 or 6 years, and I lost track of it for 10 or 15 years. And then when I was running the business and we were growing and the business got really stressful, I was finding it as kind of that kind of grounding and almost like a chance to have a power nap in 20 minutes. I was just trying to look for some way to keep up with the chaos. So I've used it sporadically as a tool, kind of a self-healing kind of tool on an as needed basis. And I'm not like some people say twice a day you should get up and spend 20 minutes. I just personally can't find that kind of time. I'm a little bit too all over the place. But breathwork came through some group facilitated sessions, and what struck me was how breath work and meditation kind of got to the same place. And for some people, using meditation, which is kind of a peaceful process, or breath work, which is a bit more intentional, a bit more physical, if they're just different ways to kind of maybe get to a similar location. Some people, I think, like the act of doing something. So therefore, it's a more attractive path to the same place. Whereas some people like the act of not doing something, and that's a more. So again, it's not right or wrong. Which one suits people differently? But there was an interesting insight around breath work, which is meditation is about using your mind to calm your mind down, which is kind of like asking the wolves to guard the sheep,
Yeah.
right? Whereas
Yeah.
breath work is about me saying, well, I can't control my mind. What I will use, I'll control my breath, which I can totally control, and I
Mm.
will subjugate my mind, which is kind of another way of thinking about breath work, which does kind of, but breath work may be more difficult. So it's, who wants to work harder to get there, and who wants to kind of relax in this thing. So, um, but my experience with both, I see breath work as, it can be that kind of relaxation meditation piece. I also see it from a performance standpoint. So if I'm going to go on a big mountain biking ride, I will choose my breath style intentionally to allow me to go longer, further, faster. So how do you change your performance through something that you can kind of control mentally, which
What's
I think,
your go-to breathwork exercise? Because there's so many, right? There's so many different exercises you can do using your breath. There's like the box breathing, there's pranayama.
yeah.
So what's like the easiest thing that someone can do at their desk if they're stressed out or feeling anxiety rising?
Yeah, I think the box breathing to me is kind of the go-to if you're trying to find a structure. The other one is just simply kind of concentrating on the air entering your nose and leaving your nose and just letting your system calm down. So that's probably closer to meditation. Whereas I think the box breathing is really good at kind of, for example, we use box breathing for strategy sessions. We get the team together, they come out of the office, everyone's got 1,000 emails. You sit down, you have your coffee. Let's solve this big problem. And I'll say, okay, great. For the next 5 minutes, we're going to just do this box breathing. You can hear people collectively, oh man, not this again. And then after the 5 minutes, you go, okay, now how do we feel? Are we ready to be in the right space for this conversation? And yeah, I feel so much clearer. I've been able to put that stuff to the side. And I think those kind of transition moments, box breathing is unparalleled. But
Fabulous.
I might have only tried 4 or 5 types of breath exercise, and it's probably another 1,000 that I'm not aware
And it's not even necessary. This is the thing. Like we've got information overload. We've got access to so many things, but let's just keep it simple. I like this Buddhist quote that I came across. It's the philosophy of the monk living, which is live simple, but think high. So just keep it simple. So
of. Yeah.
if you keep things simple, then you can actually think higher and you can have that clarity that you just mentioned, and you release that fogginess that comes from just the fact that we do live in a very noisy world.
Yeah, and I think there's no am I doing the best one? Doesn't matter. You're doing something. And
That's
don't
it.
the FOMO, you shouldn't have FOMO if you're trying to relax.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, I think this is a really good place to end our conversation. I just found it so interesting, and it's great from the last time we spoke to now. You've now introduced the breath work into your life and even to your organization. It's forward thinking. It's fabulous. There's so many other types of, I think, therapeutic techniques that we can foster, we can bring into our life, but something as simple as just focusing on our breath and regulating our emotions and our mental health is, I think it's one of the most cheapest and easiest things for everyone to do. Super accessible.
I think it's great. I think we all, if you believe in the premise that we all want to live a big life, um, then realizing that in order for us to do great work and to be our best selves, we do need to look after ourselves. We need to find ways to recover. We need to be able to find ways to come at things with energy and freshness and open-mindedness and not run down and not beat up and not stressed out is such an important insight, and one that was maybe lost for decades. I'll wake up at 4 and I'll drink 17 cups of coffee and I'll be the superhero of kind of hard work. And I think what we're all kind of realizing is that you can do some of that, but you can't do all of that. You do need to find a way to look after yourself so that you can then be your best self, because you will get much better results if you can find that balance. So I love what you're doing, and I think it's great to have a chance to have a conversation on it. So thank you so much for having me.